And we're joined today by 9 distinguished discussion panelists. Danish Ali from psychology, if you would just raise your hand. You might not be able to see his name tag, but this is Danish. Maya Castro, art history. Romina Herrera, digital media. Prevart Janvier, criminal justice. Walter Jouvin, English. Daniela Saczek, political science. And my apologies if I'm butchering anyone's name. We have a very diverse group of names. Susan Tapia, international relations and political science. Edwith Theogene, is that right? Liberal studies. And Kirk Villanon, history and political science. Dean Schriner.
Perfect. Can everybody hear me? Well, thank you. It's an I want to take this opportunity to thank you for coming and also publicly thank Dr. Landorf and Dr. Dasher for not only hosting the 3rd annual conference, but also for leading this transformative educational initiative at FIU. I think that's an amazing job what you're doing, and I wanted to publicly thank you for all of that. So, for the next hour or so, or a little bit less, we have the opportunity to have a conversation with the students, and I thought the best format would be for me just to ask some general questions and let the students jump in as they choose, as opposed to me calling on them. And then also open it up to the audience whenever you feel that you have a question that would be relevant to the conversation, that you just jump in when you think it's most appropriate. Or we could take a break and you could line up or something and ask the questions. But I just want to have an open dialogue where you're able to enjoy your lunch and pay attention at the same time. And we'll give our undivided attention to the students who are actually in the courses experiencing a lot of these theoretical things that we talk about as instructors or educational administrators, but these are the people who are actually in the courses, doing the assignments, and then who are hopefully going to graduate and take those skills into the workplace. And we really want to know what's working and how it's working for them and how it impacts what they do and what they think. So as sort of an outline of what I'm thinking, what's a global citizen? And the 3 outcomes I looked up according to global learning were obtaining a global perspective, global awareness, and global engagement. Those were the 3 learning outcomes of being a global citizen. So with that in mind, I think I'll just throw out a question or 2, and then you guys just jump in whenever you feel like answering. Deal? Deal. Okay, here's my first question. Why is global learning important to you in terms of your educational goals and equally important to you for your career goals?
Well, I'll start. As an art history major, I participated in many art-oriented classes. So as I said in my presentation, I was part of the Aesthetics and Values with John Bailey, and I was also in Reacting. So as an art history major, you deal a lot with art, politically, socially, in every context you can imagine. And you definitely need a communication, a relationship with communication between people, different cultures, different backgrounds, just so you have a different perspective of like what's affecting them, what's important to them, and the social and cultural interactions they have. So as an art history major, I focused a lot on that, especially in the contemporary art world. You have post-colonial theory, you have gender studies, and you have a bunch of different ideas floating around. And it's definitely really important for me, like, to get the knowledge that I got from these classes. So like in Reacting, the difference of like people, the way different people think in Aesthetics and Values would be the way people see art and how different people from different backgrounds see art and how it's relevant to their lives. I mean, art isn't such a big topic now as it used to be, like in the early 1900s. So it definitely has an impact in the way I see things and how I wish to go on with my career. So.
Hello. I would like to add, I'm a recent graduate. I just graduated in December. So for me, with global learning, how it's affected me is that we live in a global society. And with a lot of the jobs that are out there right now, they want you to have that kind of experience. They want you to know different languages. They want you to know what's going on in the world. And they want you to know, like, the way the world is reacting towards us and the way we're going to react towards them. Those are important relationships that we have to delve into. With a lot of the courses that I took with global studies, I was able to make those kind of connections, so that way I can market myself in the job market.
Well, we live in an ever-increasing global world, whether we like it or not, and that global perspective is incredibly valuable to the new markets that are opening up, the way that business will be in the future. I learned French here at FIU, and the other day my boss told me, Kirk, call Paris and find a hotel from this day to this day. And without that global perspective and that global learning, it's impossible, and you limit yourself opportunities that you would otherwise have in the business world.
Hello. As far as communications is concerned, because in digital media we study communications and the mass media, definitely I think especially here in FIU, or just because we're in the United States, we're in a privileged position, and this whole globalization that everybody talks about is pretty much about US culture being pushed into everybody else. And when you don't know how those other countries are experiencing our culture and how it affects them, like if we don't know about those voices, then we really can't make any like changes that, you know, to make them be more heard. And that's part of being a global citizen, to like have everybody have their points of view, not only us pushing things onto them.
Sure, go ahead.
As criminal justice is concerned, we live in a global society, like everybody has been saying. So a crime in Italy can affect something that happens in America, and we can't narrow ourselves to what happens in our society. We have to understand what's going on around the world, because with globalization, crime is reaching everybody now.
And well, my career goals are very, I guess, literally globally oriented, because I want to enter into diplomacy. I want to enter the U.S. Foreign Service and become a U.S. diplomat. Specifically relating to what I came up here with my colleagues to present, with reacting to the past, you really learn to understand the perspectives of others by putting yourself in their shoes. So let's say contemporarily we see riots in other countries, we see people reacting with violence. We can't really understand how people can come to those decisions. But when I put myself in the shoes of someone who was starving, who had families and kids in Paris when there was no food to go around, you really understand how people can come to that ultimate conclusion. And it's important maybe not to agree, but to understand.
Let me ask you a question. If you were, in each of your respective majors, if you were designing a course, what activities would you include in that course for global learning that perhaps are not in an existing course today? What activities would you put in the course?
Well, I took World Ethnographies, and I really loved that course. And I took it with Juliet Arazo, and she did the best that she could with that course to give us that otherworldly experience. But I also did a study abroad program, and that was amazing, changed my life, and I loved it. And actually got to spend a month in Italy. And I kind of feel like I wish that everyone had the opportunity to leave the country to study abroad, or at least get as close to it as possible. So I would love to incorporate that if we had the funds or something.
Can we really replicate on campus here the kind of extraordinary experience that you just mentioned of actual study abroad?
Well, the fascinating thing about living in Miami, I don't think you can actually replicate it, but we can get to it as close to it as possible. I mean, we live with so many different cultures here, so many different individuals that are from so many different places. Like, I just talked to a gentleman that was working with the food and stuff like that, and he was from Sweden. So, I mean, like, everyone comes to Miami. If we can actually incorporate that kind of unity within the community to explore some sort of, to create like some sort of learning or something like that, that would be awesome. Like to make it more real, I guess, to extend it, I don't know.
Yeah, and definitely in Miami there are like clusters and neighborhoods that are very like ethnic. The people just like kind of gather together, and you can find everybody that's, you know, Jamaican, Puerto Rican, Cuban, and you can experience, at least as far as like maybe South American and Caribbean people, which are the most that we have here, you could get involved into their culture and experience that. And I think that's definitely something that I was thinking too, that it'd be great not only to have students in the classroom, but to send them out there so they can interact with other people and then come back and tell you about those experiences.
Question, just to know exactly what I'm gonna say. You're saying in terms of like your major, right?
Well, I figured since that's what you're studying, you would.
Right,
know this, but
okay,
if you wanted
okay,
to
so
pick
yeah,
another area,
definitely.
you could
Oh,
pick another
cool.
area.
So I know what I'm talking about. Oh, so I definitely would integrate the aesthetics and values class, like with the one that I have with John Bailey, but I'd make it more focused, since I'm an art history major, I'd make it more focused with like the history of art, and I, in particular, because I like Latin American art, we are in Miami, there's a great bunch of people from different Latin American countries. I would definitely focus on Latin American art, personally, just because I feel like if you're in Miami and you have like this awesome Latin American community here, so you have Cubans, Venezuelans, Colombians, Argentinians, Brazilians, you know, people forget Brazil's in there. It's definitely a good way to get into contact with like your neighbors. I mean, we do have people from different parts of the country, maybe from the north or maybe Europeans, but there is a strong Latin American background, and I feel like it'd be really cool to empower each other, like, you know, your fellow hermanas and hermanos, and to basically highlight that in the aesthetics and values class would definitely be more integral to like the way you know everyone around you. So that's the way I would do it.
As a history major, I'd like to see history taught more in the reacting to the past style, where you are forced to put yourself in the position of, in the mind of a historical character, because reading about some old guy that died hundreds of years ago is not appealing to all students. It's appealing to me, but then again, I'm a history major. I love history. But if you're forced to put yourself in that position where you understand a different way of thinking, where you understand the issues that were dealt with at the time, I think you understand and learn history and I guess master history more than if you're just reading it from a book. And in some classes in the history department, I'm noticing that this is starting to happen. I took an American Revolution course where we not reenacted, but debated the issue of the Constitution, when should we adopt it or not. And that was the day where students were all involved. Most if not all the students came to class and they knew their stuff. They had read, they had understood the issues, and you had an enthralling debate. So I think more of the personal involvement.
Piggybacking on how you view the curriculum being taught, when you're talking about engagement into the text, engagement into the actual content, at some point though, you still have to engage in reading.
Yes.
My line of work is, I'm a reading specialist at Florida Center, and I work with all kinds of students who have reading difficulties. Asking all of you to look back 2-3 years when you first came to college, looking at the reading issues that my students have, if their art history, if their poli-sci, if their whatever class they're required to take from a reading perspective, where I know my kids are coming in saying, reading is boring, and I have to get through it. What services did you feel you could have, really would have benefited you? What did you encounter reading-wise? Because yes, we have to understand the content of what you're reading in order to interpret and give that kind of interactive feedback. So my question to you is, did you encounter any difficulties when first learning the content? And if you did, what would have benefited your engagement with the content?
For me, when I first started college, like the first day, you get like 7 books, and they're like, you need to read this in a week, and you're just like, wow, you're blown away, and you're just so caught up in the fact that you have to do all this work and the reading that you don't even digest what you're actually like reading. But I think it was a slow step process for me because I was in school forever. But once you have that passion and that desire, and you actually, like, the words don't become words anymore. Like, you're actually in the reading, you're actually in the text. So I think it's a matter of like interest, passion, and just like, I mean, I don't know if you're looking for like a more technical answer or
Whatever your experience was.
Okay, well, my personal experience was just that, like, once I started falling in love with what I was actually reading, like, the first class that I had was, like, a European history class, and we were reading, like, all these old texts, and I just started falling in love with all of that. And then from then, it was like, I don't care how many books you ask me to read, I'm going to read them, you know, and it also, I think if the teacher marries the reading with the lectures and the course to actually provide, like, a multi-dimensional, I guess, experience, that helps a lot, too.
Well, I'm a very visual learner. When I don't my majors are international relations and political science, so they're very heavy in theory, and you have to read a lot. Whenever I don't understand something in a text, or I'm reading and it's just glossing over, I go to YouTube. And then I look for a video on it, but I've read it before, so seeing that video, it helps me, it gives me a deeper understanding. If not, I start making charts, like this theory relates to this, and they did this and this, and I'll make a little picture out of it. So I guess making your own little pictograph of what you learned, or.
She's a very good artist.
Yeah, and like to piggy off what Susan said, I'm also a very visual and tactile learner. Like, I can read something and I can get it, but it's nothing like actually like seeing something or like, really digesting it. So like what you said and like what Susan said, it's really good to like marriage both things, like the lecture and what you like, and also if you're interested in it, you're gonna put like that little more of an effort to learn. And like, I don't know, I related to things in my life, like art history, so then I go to galleries, and then, or I go to some museums, or I'll watch docs on like art. So that's how I process things in like historical content and how it reflects. So like that would be a really good way in my eyes to see stuff. Like, Susan, YouTube is amazing because it's just all there. But, so you have different things in some ways to like bring boring stuff relevant to someone's life. So like if you're always on Twitter and you want them to learn something about Robespierre, create a Twitter account for Robespierre and see how he would tweet or something like that. Or something like really fun, like interactive, and like just so it's relevant and like you see how it is and like you're using something you're familiar with. So I don't know.
But when you've been introduced to a perspective in one of your classes that significantly conflicts with your personal values, how do you handle that? Without, you don't have to be specific to the class or the exercise per se, but when you've been introduced to something that just doesn't sit well with you personally, what do you do?
For me, just to give you the background, I studied I got my bachelor's in liberal studies with a minor in sociology, anthropology, and a minor in labor studies, and a minor of law, ethics, and society. So I was presented a bunch of different perspectives, and one of the things that stood out for me was like feminism, and there's all these theories about feminism, women's rights, and different like the third wave, first wave, and then like black feminism theory and all this stuff. And for me, it was kind of like, regardless of whether I agreed with it or not, as long as I had that full understanding of it, I appreciated that the most. Like, I wanted to actually digest like all these different theories, all these different attitudes, these presentations, opinions, and just get like a good grasp of that. And that to me spoke volumes, because even if I disagreed with it, at least I had an understanding of it, so I could at least like have a conversation about it, like that's how I dealt with it. Just even if I didn't feel that, I don't want to, like knowledge, regardless of how useful it is, still adds value to your life. So I was appreciative of that.
Yeah, I think it depends greatly on how the professor approaches the subject, because I've noticed maybe what some students think in class is that they're being forced to believe a concept when they're just being taught a concept or explained to it, and maybe that's why sometimes they're kind of apprehensive about like, no, like I don't want to listen to this, or why do I even have to like learn this? And like Edwith was saying, it's just the more you know, then you can create your own concepts and like form your own opinions about what matters to you or what doesn't matter to you, but you need to have that knowledge of what everybody else is talking about it to come to that conclusion. So I think it's just the approach, like it's just being like, this is like out here for your understanding. It's not something that you have to agree with, and maybe sometimes the way some professors approach it is not in that way, so that's why we might feel threatened and not accept it at first.
I took a political ideologies course, and the way it was taught was you would read the certain number of pages of the text, and then the next day in class, you would have not a debate, but a discussion, and you would have obviously opposing opinions, and debates would flourish. And when I would when I knew a text was coming that I absolutely abhorred the ideology or absolutely agreed, I found myself reading those more just so I knew, and when they say this, I'm going to say this to counter it, just so I could, debate it thoroughly. So I found that even if you disagree with it, if it's taught in a way where you're allowed to express that disagreement, you'll master the content more.
If you're invited to critique it, then it's
exactly.
I have a question. So my question here is how participating in global learning classes that are going to expose you to things that are familiar, that are not familiar, changing your own perspective on yourself. Because it's going to be very important to say what you were saying, okay, if this person or the someone that I know with disability, I'm going to be very careful with how this is different to allowing the reading to be changed in your very core. So is anything from the global learning activities that affect and change your perspectives in yourself?
I would speak on that. Yes, it's changed a lot. It actually, I mean, I don't want to be dramatic or anything, but I kind of feel like they changed my life. When I did the study abroad program. I was going to FIU and I was just like a student, going to class, commuter school, you know, so it's like go to school, then go home. That's where real life is. And I did the study abroad in Italy, and for that project, we had to do a comparison between Italy and the United States, between fascism and the New Deal. And for my group project, we had to study women. So I had to study women in the United States and study women in Italy and compare them within the 1920s and the 1930s. And the story that we all believe is like, oh, the 1920s, like women were fully empowered, they got the right to vote. That's the story that I learned in elementary school, right? So then when I delved into this project and I got to learn what really happened to women and what was going on and like women issues, and then bring that to the contemporary to see like the effects of that. When I came back to FIU, I got really involved with a lot of feminist organizations, and I started the National Organization for Women here on campus. I also linked up with Daniela. Daniela works with a lot of different, like CIW, the Coalition for Immokalee Workers. We actually went to Italy together, and when we came back, it just kind of like lit a fire under us because it offered us this global perspective of how the rest of the world was actually living. Like, I'm first generation American, my family is from Haiti, so I feel like I was raised with it, kind of, to know that, okay, the rest of the world doesn't live the way that America does, but when you're actually in the thick of it. So I had the comparison of what it was like to live in Italy, what it was like to live in Haiti, and then what it's like to be an American here. And all those things bounced together. It just opened up my eyes to look at everyone else. I want to know where you're from, what you're doing, how you're living, what are your experiences, your cultural lifestyle. And then I also took a world ethnographies class, what actually gave us an anthropological, sociological perspective of different ethnicities and different groups, from going all the way to like, you know, tribes in Africa, all the way to like Puerto Ricans in New York. So all of those things, like, I can't look at the world the same. I'm not allowed to anymore. I know way too much. So that's how it's affected me.
Yeah, and like I'd agree with that. We're in America, United States of America, so you know, I grew up with like, you know, really cool nursery rhymes and stuff like that. But then after taking reacting, I guess it was like the more I progressed in my academic career at university, that I realized like I'm not the same as everyone else. Like she would point out like exactly how she felt. So I would read, you know, the social contract. I would read different stuff on like the French Revolution, but it's like, I'm not French. I'm Colombian. I'm not even Colombian. I'm American Colombian because my parents are Colombian. I have this weird birthmark on my forehead. I have weird slanted eyes, so I don't fit the traditional idea of like, I'm too Hispanic to be American, and I'm too white to be Colombian, and I'm a woman. So like after that, you tend to realize that you do fit a different category in like what you're studying. And also, in my career, art history, there's not a lot of Hispanic art historians in the U.S. They're usually white, and there's nothing wrong with that. But you definitely start to assimilate how, you know, you're always taught like, okay, this is how things are. You're a woman, and then you're a man. But then you're just like, no, but I'm much more than that. I'm not a white American. I'm Hispanic, and I'm not even that. I'm like an immigrant. So then after reading like the social contract, you know, he was particularly talking about French woman, but I'm not French. So you know, you start dealing with these different complex ideas that don't really fit you, but you start to develop like a different view of thinking around the world, and you tend to realize that you're not the same as like someone who probably is from Colombia and is a woman, or someone who, you know, is probably in the same boat as I am, but they don't live in Miami. Miami's full of Hispanics, you know. How many people here are like white Americans, you know? So it definitely is a different layer that definitely comes to light, and it really like makes you think a lot about the person that you are and the person you want to be and who you want to become. So I would definitely agree with her.
Yep. I had a very similar experience. The global learning class that I took was Introduction to Labor Studies. And one of the things that it really helped me understand was that sometimes when you're a student, it's easy to be caught up in your own world. You know, graduating or looking for jobs on the job market. And through that class, I started to see what I was going through wasn't exactly only a personal problem. It also has to do because of the global world that we live in, as we've talked about, different things that are going on in the world that affect labor and a lot of other issues. And then I started to understand that it wasn't only something that I was going through, but it connected it to larger social justice issues. And that actually helped me, that understanding from the global learning perspective is what allowed me to have the job that I have now at the Miami Workers Center and be able to connect what's going on in the world to what's going on in the communities.
The job market. If any of you have interviewed, has it come up in the interview? Will it make a difference to employers and how? But specifically with the example, what happened in the interview?
I'm in the job market, so if any of you guys have a job. But yeah, definitely. I mean, it's interesting because when I was younger, speaking Creole didn't hold that much water and weight. Now it does. Like, they want you to speak a second language. They don't care, like, what language it is. I've gone to different interviews and talked to different people, and the global perspective has helped because for me, like, I'm interested in like social justice, community organizing, and we live in a global community. Like, whether you go out there or not, they're coming here. So you have to be able to deal with different personalities, different cultural issues, different lifestyles, and different resources. So I think like the global classes that we've taken here, it's really helped me like master that and open that up. My resume looks nice, you know, like, and I like it. So, in interviews, like I interviewed for one position and it was like for a hotel like on South Beach, and it was like kind of like a mid-management type of position, and he wanted to know how I would deal with like different kinds of guests. I've also applied for different like resumes, and they actually do ask you questions like, how do you deal with different cultural groups, or what's your understanding, stuff like that. I mean, it's there too, and I think it also helps, like, when you're sitting down in an interview and, like, when you're parlaying with, like, the different questions, you have those resources to pull. I don't know if that was helpful.
There's a lot of criminal justice majors out there, and if you're trying to get a good federal job, they're looking for differences in your background. So if you have a good global learning base, or if you take a psychology or anthropology major or minor, that looks good on your resume. So it definitely helps when you're going to apply for a job.
So how do you put it in your resume?
You just, you add that, like qualifications. Let's say I'm going for a federal job. I like global learning classes. I study abroad in criminal, Dr. Cohen over here, we went to London. We visited Scotland Yard. We visited different police stations and learned how they did things in London, which is, they say, the safest, you know, country in the world. But so it's a different perspective, and it helps you see how people live. With
So you put a line in qualifications that says global learning experience?
Yes, global learning experience, and then they'll ask you, what does that mean? And you tell them, my school sponsored this global learning program where I was supposed to take 2 classes every semester, and then I went to study abroad, and I plan on doing more study abroad if they offer it for criminal justice. Maybe independent study to London again. Yeah.
Could you explain also how the study abroad was done in your particular course? Because it's not a long-term study abroad, it's different.
It was a comparative criminal justice class. The class was taught here at FIU. We went to London for spring break, and the whole week we went to Scotland Yard. We visited different sites like the Tower of London, the Clink Museum, which is the oldest museum of London, oldest jail museum in London. We visited Norwich Police Station. We visited, or Constabulary, right? We went to Parliament, so we saw the criminal justice at work in London.
So the interviewer noticed that and said, hey, what is this?
Yes.
More than, for example, having a minor in psychology.
Yes.
Well, my career path is completely globally oriented, so all my any application will ask, what are your international experiences? So I'll be able to list, you know, I did a study abroad in Japan. I was there for a certain amount of time. You know, I was backed by my work in the Honors College. I organized a society to go and do international service trips. So that was my global learning experience with FIU, and that's how I put it into my resumes.
Well, I would say that it's helped me indirectly, not in a direct way, because because of my academic achievements, I was part of the advisory board meeting for the School of Journalism and Mass Communications. Most of the board members are either mostly white Caucasian people that own media companies, or Hispanics that own media companies, because we're in Miami, and that's just how the media market is. And I was able to argue with them some of the ways that how they want to run the business and what they think is desirable for people graduating from our major in communications, and just pretty much their viewpoints. I think my background with global learning and just in general in the education that I began at FIU, I was able to counter-argue with them and just be like, this is how your generation sees it and how you've been running media for all this time, but this is how our generation sees media, and how it has to change now because of globalization and because of all these mingling of cultures going on. It can no longer be that way. And I think it was since that meeting that then I've been recommended to go to other events, and that's why I'm sitting in this conference here today. So it's helped me indirectly.
As a result of your classes and all the things that you've done, are you more aware of people's similarities or more aware of people's differences? And second, does it really matter?
Yes. Yeah, I'm aware.
Both or just both?
If anything, yes. That the first part was that. What was the first part again? Sorry.
More aware of the similarities between people, or more aware of the differences?
Oh, more
And
aware.
if that-
Oh no, for sure. I'm more aware of people's differences, and it's very important that we acknowledge their differences and acknowledge that the fact that we do live in a global society, that we shouldn't, I guess, in one way, participate in, a kind of global environment, but at the same time be critical in the fact that we don't want to erase voices from the picture itself. So as an English major, at least what me and Danish have been had in class in global issues around the globe, globalism was, a big forefront, and the whole idea that women have been, sort of seen as second-class citizens all around the world in very different facets and very different ways. And even with intersectionality, the fact that if you're poor, a POC, person of color, that just doesn't help to the fact that the world's changing and then you're being left behind. So if we are, going to approach, sort of more of a globalized world, we have to be more critical in the sense that we have to include everyone's voices and acknowledge that they are different, and that we have to give them the right to, or they are given the right to be heard in our new, changing global society, and acknowledge that they are different, and we should accept their differences as opposed to, assimilate to some sort of notion of one identity, that we all see as a global citizen, in an instance. Just so be aware that we are global citizens, but we're all different and coming from different perspectives, in that moment, per se. Sorry.
Go ahead, I'm sorry.
Well, I was just going to say, from my experience, I feel like I've learned that we're more similar from my experience, just because it's kind of here, we're going to school, we're trying to make a better life for ourselves, and it's being able to look at the rest of the world, that's what everyone's trying to do. They're just trying to be happy, trying to make a better life for themselves, but it's the way that they're actually living, that's what I was able to see, able to come out of my own personal bubble and see that I can make that connection and that we're just alike. So, I do agree with the differences. There are different perspectives out there, but I kind of feel at the core, we're all the same. And I think that is important.
Well, we have a very diverse student population, so I'm sure you've encountered students who don't share your enthusiasm for global learning. Have you encountered those students in the classroom, and has anybody been frightened by it or have a different perspective of the importance of globalism?
Honest, I really don't think people know what it is. You speak to people, we're all really smart people, and we take into consideration current events and stuff like that. But sometimes I'll talk to people and I literally sit in a class and I'm there reading a book, and I turn around, there's 15 people there, they're all on their phones. If they're not on Twitter, they're on Instagram. If they're on Instagram, they're on Facebook. And and I asked them oh, did you hear about what happened in North Korea? Did you hear what Kim Jong-un did? And they're no, I don't. And I'm how do you not know? Aren't you a political science major? You should know this. And then I get outraged, but then I have to think of not everyone is as active in like the news realm that I am, or like, but I feel like those are things that everyone just should just know.
Is that a good thing or a bad thing?
I think it's bad. I think it's horrible. I think it's really bad because I mean it's just basic things, and like when I travel like to Colombia, the most like really simple things, and I'm sure like when everyone else has traveled to different countries, they notice that everyone at least has like a linear mentality of like, you know, current events and like simple things, and like they know the relation between this and that, or they know like this happened in this country, and it's just like things that is just known. And like here I get really shocked when people don't even know like the basics of like stuff. And I know it's not just me, I know a lot of my friends notice the same things too, and I know teachers notice it, and I know other people notice. So it's really crazy to me how like you don't know what's happening in North Korea, like what is that, like, you know, so it really is shocking to me. So I don't know.
Just to add this, I started at FIU before the global learning requirement was required. And when I came back to FIU, like I left FIU and then I came back and they were like, you still have to take these classes to graduate. And I'm like, what are you talking about? Like I took these classes. And they're like, no, they're different. And I was like,
GL added on there.
yeah. And I was like, man, like, okay, whatever. Because at that point I was just like, I just want to finally get this degree and get out of here. So I'll jump through a hula hoop if FIU asks me to. So I took the classes, and the difference that I noticed was before, a lot of these classes, they were just presenting you information. They're just like, here you go, these are the concepts, these are the theories, and you would spit them back out. Now, with the global perspective added, it actually allows you to make like a comparison, and it actually allows you to like, to think, you know, it was just more like engaging, and it was different, and I got a sense of that difference. So I kind of feel that like, even though there are people that are still like not in the know, with this kind of setup, I feel like we're moving towards people that are trying to get into the know. I mean, the other world, I feel, the other world, when I mean say the other world, I mean outside of the United States, I think some people, they do digest these concepts and these theories, and I kind of feel like with these kind of classes and this sort of program, we are engaging people. Like, I don't really watch the news, I'll be honest with you, but I do get a lot of stuff from like Twitter, from social media and all these things, but it's a matter of like, what are you looking at on these social media things? Like, where are you going for your information? And it's kind of like, because of these classes, it was able to engage me to be like, okay, well, let me look up this. Instead of Googling like what Katy Perry's doing, let me Google what's going on in Korea, like, you know, so.
I see it as a difference in the way that people see their education as either a means to an end to ultimately just get a job, or as a way to grow as a person. I think someone mentioned like a lot of people come here, they go to class, and then they go home, and that's where their life is. But if you see your education as something that helps you to grow, to help you learn and help you understand the world, then that's the difference in how you take your global learning courses.
The courses make you more humble or more, pick another word, but.
In a sense, at least like when we take the class, since it does divulge into women's issues around the globe, and even though like there was a lack of like as men. Oh shit! Sorry. Still. Hello.
Real close.
Given that we were, me and Danish were in the global issues course, well, we still are, and we always talk about, I guess, just women's issues around the globe and how we have to focus on, like, I guess, specific events. At least, like, the most, I guess, backlash, or not backlash, pushback, I guess, that I received from, or at least criticism of it, or at least how, I guess I approach it in that instance is just coming, oh, actually, sorry, I forgot what I was going to say. So what I was going to Yeah.
All day long, don't worry.
Actually, what was the question again?
I don't know. The outcome, sort of, did it change we were back about being self-reflective. Has it made you more humble or more aggressive or more whatever? I mean, you fill in the word. But.
No, it just made me a little bit, well, every day when I would go to class and I would read these chapters about like what happens to women throughout history all around the globe, it just kind of really angered me that like, if anything, we allowed this to happen, and we still continue to allow this to happen. And no matter what, like, even though, yeah, like, kids don't know about what's happening in North Korea, but, like, they're not aware of the fact that, I guess, there's a growing queer and LGBT youth, I guess, homeless youth, I guess, rising in Miami itself, because, I guess, families are still not accepting, I guess, of queer identities or gay identities. And it just, I don't know, it just really angers me that, like, if anything, we're not... at least how I approach myself and how I'm already in a privileged position where I could just then be critical as opposed to actually like go out and do something about it in this way. So at least with these courses, being aware of like what's happening all around the world, I just like take into fact that like I'm such an like nice ivory tower, even though I'm like not a professor, I'm still a student. It's just that there's people all around the world that are like facing all these atrocities, and we're still here learning about, I guess, Shakespeare. I guess for English majors, it's just like, why do I care about him, as opposed to, I guess, we're reading about more contemporary writers that are talking about current issues that are going on right now, or at least stories like Junot Diaz and how he's never pushed, and you have to take, I guess, courses that are outside of, I guess, the main curriculum of, I guess, the English degree, and we're still pushing for like more dead white authors, I guess, in this way to shove down, I guess, English majors' throats. But I guess that's sort of my criticism of the English theory. It's
I think these courses. Wait. Okay. All right, got it. All right, I think these courses really brought a lot of understanding to me about different issues that's going on, about how people act, about how people feel. Especially when I was taking women's studies course, I heard, women are treated so horribly and how they're treated by men. A lot of time I took it personally, but then I realized that these issues do occur. And it's not one particular man or one particular group, but just overall and how we vary from one another.
Yeah, I had the same experience of kind of zooming out and understanding what was going on in a systemic sense. So, for instance, I did feel humbled when I learned about a lot of the disparities, and the way that some of my other classes presented it was always, this is what's going on in those developing countries. And then in my global learning class, it actually connected to a lot of the same things that are going on in our own community or inside of this country, that are conditions that would almost mirror conditions that you find in these developing countries for some workers. For instance, I learned, that was the first time that I ever heard about the place in Immokalee, Florida. Most of us probably in this room haven't heard about it. I learned about it through my labor studies class, and that's where most of our tomatoes come from. And the conditions that those farm workers face, that's right next to Naples. That's an hour and a half from here. And it's really serious, really, it's really something that should get a lot of attention. We should also, when we're learning about things globally, understand what we can do where we live. As I started to learn more about what women go through and some of the economic issues, I also started to see that, yeah, it's really bad in a lot of other places in the world. But we can also see what's going on here in Miami. What are some facts that make certain women more vulnerable than others? For instance, being a person of color, being a woman, and through my job, I work with domestic workers, and I find a lot of issues of violence, a lot of economic issues that they face, and why is that? And that goes back to what's happening locally and what's happening globally. What are the global factors that push people from one country to another, and then they're here in Miami and what they're going through? So it felt really humbled to learn about what's going on overall, and then how it connects to, somewhere that I grew up, and some things that I never really saw before I gained this understanding.
I've learned to think very Socratically in terms of, I know that I know nothing. So as the world is constantly changing for the good and for the bad. So as the world keeps changing, I have to keep learning to keep up.
All of you have been through one or more courses. Would you say that all beliefs and values are equal, or relative, or some better? And how do you grapple with that? I'm intentionally vague. So when you get competing or contradictory points of view in the classroom.
With the London class that I went to London to visit all these police stations and offices, one thing that I battled with was the fact that in America, we have this long history of gun control and our citizens wanting to carry guns and stuff. And so when I went to London, I was told that most of their officers don't carry guns, and I was like, what? But they have a long history, 180 years almost, of not carrying a weapon on duty. They have small armed police officers, like a team of armed police officers, but yeah, all right.
Just testing your ability to adapt.
Right. Yeah. So it was, at first, I was apprehensive because I was, oh wow, everything's going. So it was an eye-opener for me. Would I say our system's better or worse? I don't know. They claim to have, the safest country. So, but it was an eye-opener for me because I'm walking through the streets and I'm apprehensive because I'm from America, where crime rate is soaring. Where there, they have, pickpockets. That's all they really worry about, Nobody's gonna walk up with a weapon to attack you or anything. So it was definitely different. Would I say our system's better or worse? I think we adapt to our society and they've adapt to theirs, so.
Yeah, I think that's also the understanding that I got from it, that in each society, their systems of belief or just their laws and everything that they have going on, it's because of how their society has been working. So it works for them, and then what works for them might not work for us, but that doesn't mean that it's worse. It's just that it's a difference in culture.
One of the big things that was really eye-opening for me was that, since I came back from my study abroad program, I became like a feminist. So I was like, yay, women's rights. And I was just like, I want to get out there, I want to shout, I want to assert myself and stuff. And in one of my classes, we had to compare what it was like to be a woman here in the United States and what it was like to be a woman in the Middle East. And the big thing about it was like the hijab, the covering, is actually an assertion of like women's rights, which I had no idea. And that concept, like not a lot of people know, and that it varies like culturally. So within the little bubble that I had here, it was like I was presented with like my belief of what it's like to be a woman in America, and then the belief of how it is, or the concept of being a woman like in the Middle East. And it was like, I couldn't sit there and be like, well, this is right and this is wrong, because it wasn't a matter of what was right or wrong. It was just a matter of like, this is the historical context and the lifestyle and the cultural setup here, and this is my historical context and my cultural lifestyle and like all these things here. And they're just two different worlds. And I was able to just be like, okay, well, they're equal, they're separate, they're just not the same. Oh.
I wanted to know how your development through these classes has affected your conversations with your families, if at all.
Oh, at least everyone hears me. At least like whenever I go to family meetings now, or family dinners, or whenever I go visit my family, I always stay quiet because no matter what, like they're very traditionalist, and I guess it's just, for me, I just kind of talk about like, oh, how's it been, Mom? And then they just tell me, I guess, what happened, I guess, the past couple months, what I missed, what happened. And when they tell me what happened in my life and like what have I learned in school, I just say, well, a couple things happened in school, but my social life is great. I talk to a lot of people.
I'm very fortunate to have a family who really understands me and tries to like, we have similar ideas. So when I talk to them, they don't understand what reacting to the past is, and they don't understand that if I won a game, like what does that mean? Like, what do you mean you're a French revolutionist? Like that makes no sense to me. So I try to explain them like the whole background and like, oh, but you don't understand, like we killed the king, you know how exciting that is. So like it's really funny when I try to talk to them about it, and like they try to understand, you know, they're Latin American, like their first language is Spanish, so then I try to translate, and it's not really successful because there's some things that just don't make sense. So it's like a really funny interaction of trying to explain things, but they seem like really like open, and they're really curious, and they're like, oh, that sounds so cool. I don't get it, but it's so cool, and like I'm so glad you're doing well. You know, in the end, you know, I am still doing well in school, and like that's like the number one priority. Like, you know, A's and like go to grad school and like, you know, do the whole thing. So like it's really refreshing to have like a support system. Like my parents are really awesome about that, and you know, even though they don't understand, they try to. It's really funny to hear that conversation.
To contrast her, my family doesn't understand me. So it's pretty interesting because I was talking to a friend recently, and we were talking about like our beliefs and stuff like that in our family background, and my friend was like, how did you end up and come out of that family? And because my family's very like conservative, they're a little closed-minded, if you will, and for me it's kind of like presented with these courses. I've questioned a lot of stuff. I've questioned the way my family works, why it works the way that it does, you know, my outer family. I've questioned my cultural background. How does that relate to me as an individual? Like she said earlier about being Colombian and being a woman, and like the intersection, like the diverse connection of all of that. all these courses have forced me to like question those things. What's the background? What does this mean? What's the makeup of this? How did I become me? You know, and that's really changed the dialogue and the conversations that I've had with my family. Like my sister, to be whatever, she's dating this new guy, and this guy's like XYZ, and I'm like, oh, I need you to let him know that I'm a feminist and that he needs to be careful the way he talks to me. You know, like those are the things that are occurring now within my life and within my family in regards to like the classes.
As we close, I'm going to ask you one last question. In one word, we're going to go right down the line, starting with Daniela. In one word, summarize your experiences with global learning.
Questioning.
Awareness.
That was mine. Self-critical, or critical of myself, or that's not, critical.
Understanding.
Responsibility.
Is eye-opening a word, or is that 2 words? Okay, eye-opening.
Entertaining.
I was going to use that one too.
Right?
I was going to say eye-opening.
I want to say conscious.
Complicado.
It's a good way to end. Why don't we end like that?
Dr. Landorf and I are humbled. And I just want to give you a little bit of insight into how we recruited these distinguished panelists. The end of semester course assessment matrices that faculty submit to our office, I read every single one. We read every single one. And we just simply look for interesting things that were happening in courses. And then we just emailed those faculty and said, could you nominate or suggest a couple students who have participated in this thing, except for Edwith and Romina, who we met in other ways. Just send them to us. So they're extraordinary, but these are real things that are happening in courses. And these students are very special. But really, all of our undergraduates at FIU are this special and have this much to offer. And we're very humbled and honored that we've contributed a little bit to your extra specialness. So thank you very much.